everyone. Welcome to another episode of Walchet Talks. Automating processes and functions has been around for a while. However, it was mostly restricted to specialists trained in automation. You couldn't automate something on your own, and that limited the widespread adoption of automation because it restricted accessibility. Today, however, we have lots of low-code, no-code tools available to help us automate different tasks on our own. And we have Andrew Wingfield and Peter Impey, co-founders of Off-Road Legal, to walk us through this topic. Welcome. We're so happy to have you. I'm going to give the audience a little bit of background about you both. Andrew and Peter are both former lawyers from the UK who have both worked at law firms as well as large investment banks. During their time in corporate legal departments, they were part of several digital transformation and change management initiatives. Presently, through their newly founded venture, they offer consulting services to help lawyers with their technology and transformation requirements. To clarify, they address both aspects, adaptation of tech to the legal world, as well as the people management initiatives to propagate better change management. It's great to have you both with us today. Before we get into no-code, low-code automation, I thought we could take a step back and look at automation in the legal industry. Why is it required and what exactly does it mean?
Absolutely. So automation in legal is needed for the same reason as automation in other sectors. It represents progress. If it's done well, it unlocks a lot of value. And generally, automation means that things are cheaper, faster, better, and so on. Now, to give some insight, we think of automation as either being vertical or horizontal, and where automation is applied across lots of different sectors. We see that as being horizontal. But what's really interesting is automation within one sector, within legal, which is specific to the legal sector. And what we think is that automation is going to bring greater power and control for legal services at lower cost.
Indeed, Peter. And just to make it simple in terms of definitions, automation is delegating to machines some of the activities and work formerly done in a manual way by lawyers, and which took up lawyers' time.
Understood. I totally agree with you. So I think the next thing that we would want to jump into is what does no-code, low-code mean for the legal industry? And before I hand it back to you, I'm just going to provide a few relatable examples for the audience in case they're wondering what exactly is no-code, low-code. In fact, you may already be using some form of no-code, low-code without even realizing it. That holiday card that you created on Canva, for instance, you did not need the help of a graphic designer. You created that on your own. Canva has eliminated the need to hire a designer for some basic requirements. Sure, if you're designing something more complex outside of the templates available on Canva, you may still hire a graphic designer. But otherwise, Canva is able to support your basic needs. Getting your own website is another example. You used to have to hire a software specialist or a developer to actually develop and code your website. But now with Wix or WordPress, you can just choose a template, insert your content, and your website is ready instantly. Again, eliminating the need for a software specialist. This, in a sense, is low-code, no-code automation, the ability to automate processes or functions on your own. And providing this automation in the hands of the user is incredibly powerful because suddenly you can automate things in real time as and when required without having to hire someone. So, Pete, Andrew, please tell us how no-code, low-code is applied in the legal service industry. If you can provide us a few examples within law firms or corporate legal departments, that would really be great.
Yes. Okay. Usually the examples are quite specific. They're quite static to that context. I can think of one good example from a mid-sized law firm. So they actually brought automation into their billing processes. So this is an example of horizontal automation. Billing is something that many businesses do. It's not specific to legal, but in the legal context, it brought them a lot of advantages. They had, 12 offices, and they were intending to grow. And they realized they had a choice between hiring more people or consolidating to a single office and automating their billing. And the result was that they were able to expand without adding to their headcount.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Another example is in legal law firms or new independent law firms, which are disrupting the traditional model and using automation, in this case, for client onboarding. So instead of heavy human interaction, there's a lot of self-service front door, via browsers, and integrating latest personal identification software and verification systems for KYC and AML, and for taking required data and information from clients, speeding up the process, and obviously taking the human involvement out of it. And then when you look at in-house, we know examples, more than one examples of in-house legal teams using chatbots for the usual frequently asked questions that business people put to them. And again, so it's self-service for business people through
I completely agree with
browser-based
you, Andrew. In fact, in some cases where the in-house team serves direct retail clients, they often have these chatbots answer very basic questions even for the retail clients, and that seemed to work really well by reducing the workload on the legal team. So let's get into what exactly is the difference between no code and low code, because often these terms are used interchangeably. So what are your views on that?
Well, I think there's actually, to all intents and purposes, from the lawyer's perspective, very little difference between the terms low code or no code. In both cases, non-technical people, so i.e. People who are not software engineers, coders, can use what's normally an online platform. It's often in the cloud these days. But what you can do is you can create routines and data mapping to do things in a known process to bring about automation of an activity.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I was going to say, and certainly when you look at the in-house environment, the when has got a lot to do with what's going on in your business and their own plans and roadmaps, and you need to be coordinated with your major stakeholders in the business when it comes to introducing things like automation.
So I guess the next question to ask is, how do you know which instances to use no code, low code? I mean, today in the market, you have both options. You have fairly complex and sophisticated solutions which require technical implementation and the hiring of software specialists, if not software engineers themselves. And you also have the no code, low code solution. So when you are looking at a problem, how do you identify that, okay, this is perfect for no code, low code use?
Sure. I think, in understanding, when to actually go ahead, the best time is silly to say, but it's when you're ready and you're prepared to actually move to automation. And what that means, as Andrew was saying earlier, is having a strategy in place, being fully aligned with other stakeholders. But you have to, first of all, actually understand what your processes are. What this means is that for a general counsel these days, they have to have a very broad skill set. They have to be very business savvy, have excellent communications, understand the technology, great people skills, and also now understand the strategic pathway for automation. So, once you've decided that the time is right, actually sequencing that technology transformation properly is actually really important for the overall success.
Yeah, as in all these cases, it's about bringing order to chaos. And you've got to look at the whole picture. You've got to look at the whole landscape. And then you have to be very disciplined about all of the detail and the information that you collect and the way that you collect it, in order to have a good basis for implementation.
I think the devil is in the details, as you put it. So what are the challenges in using no-code, low-code technology, and what can we do to overcome them?
There's lots and lots of challenges, Priya. I think that the first challenge is that there's a massive skills gap between what lawyers know and do right now and what you need to be able to do to use these tools properly. as I've said, they're normally online platforms. They've got fantastic drag and drop capability. You can set up the workflows in a really simple way. That's why they're called low code, no code. But the skill level and the training and experience required to set up one of these workflows is actually quite high. So there's a skills gap to overcome. And you can either do that by training the lawyers, or you can bring in and train up specific legal operations.
I think that's an important point, because often you think that you have anyone can do it, which is true, but you typically do not want everyone in the firm to be doing it. You want to have a specialized team that is working on it.
Yeah, just to go on with the challenges, Priya, that you were asking about. For sure, you have to, as you were saying, know the devil and the detail, if you like. And lawyers don't. Lawyers haven't traditionally thought a great deal about the detail in the process, the order and sequence, and how to script that, and or how to improve it. And of course, in today's world, that's also combining the creation of data and properly respecting the importance of data and good data in terms of laying the foundations for even better automation and even better technology usage in the future. So it's part of a skills gap, but it's also a knowledge gap, an experience gap amongst lawyers themselves.
Yeah, this point about process is really important, because quite often the existing processes are not mapped, and when they do get mapped, you can actually find ways to improve them. It's also a challenge to organize the data that you're dealing with. So there's a lot of deep thinking that's needed around the structure, the linkages between data points and so on. And there are lots of other challenges as well around, for example, priority, what do you do first, sequencing, and so on. And I think ultimately a big challenge is knowing what the purpose is for your activity. Why are you doing this particular piece of automation? And I think that needs to fit back into this wider strategic thinking around, what's my purpose for my team or my department? For example, is the purpose to reduce cost, or am I trying to improve my turnaround time or make contracts more accurate? What's the rationale? What's the purpose? So starting with those big picture challenges is really important.
Mm. Then there's a challenge of what we call performance in two respects. The first respect is, okay, how can you convince people, because you will need to convince people in order to expend budget, that adopting automation is a good thing in the long term and in the round. That's the first thing. So it's understanding how automation performs and where the benefits are. And then there's actually doing it, which is really about the skills and the gaps and the setup and the gaps there and the process, and bringing it all together in order to create performance.
And I'm actually going to add one to that, which is a fear in the minds of lawyers of reducing legal jobs, or basically making them not as useful as they were before. And I don't actually agree with that, because I think by using automation or just any other legal tools today, you're actually creating more roles through this. So, like you mentioned, Peter, about having a dedicated team that is trained to know how to use these tools, because there's a skills gap. You don't necessarily want your lawyers taking the time out to, train themselves and be practicing law, as well as training themselves on how to use the tools and actually deploying them. You want to have someone who can bridge that skills gap by training themselves and then continuously rolling out different tools with that training. So that's a new role altogether. You have now legal process engineers, legal project manager, management associates. You have a lot more roles that are being created through the technology, and I think people don't see that as yet. There's still a lot of fear that technology is going to come and take away our jobs, and I think overcoming or addressing this fear adequately is also important.
That's right. I mean, I think there's a deep sense of concern, should we say? Maybe it's not fear as such, but definitely concern about change and the pace of change and acceleration that we keep hearing about only today, Tony Blair and Lord Hague were talking about the opportunity here in the UK to leverage technology to bring about real change, because they see that what's happening now as being the equivalent of the Industrial Revolution. I mean, so these are ex-prime ministers, leaders of political parties who really are putting out this message to society that change is here and it's happening very quickly, and that can lead to concerns. So, it's definitely possible to address these. You've got to have the right skills, the right mindset. We think it comes from leadership, but you have to be realistic about the time that it takes. So, there's a challenge to preparing, properly at all levels in your organization. And there are lots and lots of different dimensions to think about.
I think the next thing that I wanted to address was, once you've chosen a no-code, low-code solution, what is the playbook to sort of roll it out effectively?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think, Priya, that's almost another podcast in itself. But
no, I know.
Yeah, I think we always think of playbooks as being the thing that you introduce at the time and the go live phase, as it were, operational go live. But I think the playbook is something that starts a lot longer. The playbook nowadays, I think, in our terms, is the preparation for getting it right, and that's right from the concept planning stage, as it were, and knowing what you're doing.
I think the other thing that I would add, building on what you both have said earlier, is basically planning and preparing and going into the details. So one small example could be identifying how much work do you want to actually address through the no-code, low-code solution. And if it's a fairly large volume and you're a fairly large firm, then you may want to have dedicated staff whose sole role and objective is addressing all of these issues. However, if you're a smaller firm and you may not have extra bandwidth, then maybe you want to dedicate a team that will look into this for maybe 6 months or 3 months, or whatever is this timeline you deem as per the scope of the project. So it's really important to take that time to identify, as you mentioned, why are we doing this project? What is it that we want to achieve? How do we want to achieve it? And what are the parameters within which we have to work with? That is, either we're looking at solving a high volume problem or a low volume problem. We have extra bandwidth. We want to train specific people to do this all the time at any given point in time, so that we can continuously churn out solutions. It's really important to go into all of those details and pen that down and have that plan together. So if I understand correctly, what you're trying to say is that choosing a low-code, no-code solution is optimal when you, as a law firm or a legal department, you really want to take control of the process rather than rely on external solutions, because you've really understood what your problem is and what you need to have in place to fix it.
Absolutely, yes. If you think about what used to be called out-of-the-box solutions in software, that's software company design-led. It's not law firm or in-house team design-led, for want of a better expression. And so you've lost autonomy in that process. If you adopt a low-code, no-code approach, you have to skill up and you have to improve your knowledge and capability. That's the first thing. And then you're moving towards autonomy. And then you can get yourself into an incremental, progressive improvement cycle around the whole concept of low-code, no-code. And I think that the incremental aspect of it is really important when you look at the human change adaptation requirement. The two can be made to work in parallel, and that's not the case.
I actually love that explanation, Andrew, and mostly because lots of times when we do tech implementations with or even at the demo stage, when you're working with the client, they always say, can the tool do A, B, C? And you're like, not really. It can do PQR really well and a little bit of B, but not really A and C. And then you immediately see the client's face drop and they're like, oh, but we really wanted it to do A, B, C, because it's often hard to find something that meets 100% of your requirements. Typically, if you find something that meets 70%, you're good to go. So in this case, it's perfect, because if they really know what they want, and like you said, they're empowered to build it out, they will keep incrementally making changes until they get the perfect solution for their requirements. So I love that example, Andrew.
Yeah, I think it's a win-win. Absolutely.
So I guess that concludes our episode on no-code, low-code solutions. Thank you so much, Peter and Andrew. We had a wonderful time chatting with you, as well as a very educative and informative session, because I think we're all a lot wiser on no-code, low-code tools and what we can expect when we're rolling them out.
Great to speak to you. Thank you, Priya.